As we look back at week 8, I think two themes have really become clear. One of them we've unfortunately dealt with for many weeks. Injuries. There were quite a few and some very big ones this week. The other one, fantasy points. If you wanted fantasy points, you got them. Unless you were a Jets or a Giants fan. Not a pretty game. Let's get into it. Good morning. What is up? Welcome to Monday's Hangxiety. This is Club Fantasy's weekly recap show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. We are here to look back at week 8's games and tell you when it is time to panic and when it is time to chill the fuck out. With me, as always, my resident Eagles fan. Another happy day for Joshua Hudson. How are you this morning, my friend?
I'm doing great. Maybe one of these days when my boss decides to come back from his honeymoon, I won't have to work any more Sundays and I can watch all of the games. But no, definitely had to make sure my Eagles Commanders game was on at the bar because 7-1, baby. Good times.
The damn thing. The regular season wins for the Eagles are just something else right now.
You know what? At the end of the day, we're finding ways to win. And that is what great teams do. They find ways to win. It doesn't always have to be a blowout. When you can win the tough games, that's what defines the character. And that's how, when you get into the postseason and you find yourself down by 2 scores, etc., you know in the back of your head, you know what? We've done this before. We can do this. Let's put our heads down and get to work.
Yeah.
That's what another team struggles with. We're going to get to that later.
Yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of team talk on the show this week. I think most of my points aren't even fantasy related. I'm ready to talk about some of these teams because I have some issues. Let's get into some scores. So when we look back, we had the Thursday night game. Bills take care of business 24-18 over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As I mentioned, ugly game for the Battle of New York. Jets pull out 13-10. Really funny story about that game. I forgot to use a profit booster that FanDuel gave me until a minute and a half left in the game. It was 10-7 Giants, and they were like, hey, you can bet plus 310 on Jets to win the game. And so I did that and got the profit booster and got it up to like plus 560 and won like $5 on the Jets coming back and winning the game. Jaguars beat the Steelers 20-10. Jaguars offense starting to take shape, at least Travis Etienne anyway. As Josh mentioned, and as we'll talk about, Eagles beat the Commanders 38-31. Cowboys handle business, handle the Rams at home 43-20. Vikings, I don't even want to say they survived this game. The Vikings won 24-10. We're going to talk a lot more about the Vikings. The Titans, Will Levis, 28-23 over the Atlanta Falcons. Plenty of Will Levis talk coming up. Dolphins get it done against the Patriots 31-17. Saints 38, Colts 27. Panthers shocked me, at least, 15-13 over the Texans. As ugly game as you would expect from two of the worst teams in the NFL last year. Seahawks pull one out at the end against the Browns 24-20. Bengals looked really solid coming out of there by 31-17 over the 49ers. Biggest shocker of the week had to be the Denver Broncos finally beating the Kansas City Chiefs 24-9, breaking a lot of different streaks there. The Ravens get one done 31-24 against the Cardinals, and Chargers did what they were supposed to do against the Bears 30-13. Before I let Josh talk about his Eagles, we need to talk about the injuries, the unnecessary shot of Rumpelmans. You're waking up in pain. There are a lot of Minnesota Viking fans waking up in pain. Kirk Cousins, torn Achilles, done for the season. Normally, Josh, I would ask you to talk about this. I have actually fit this into a segment. We are going to talk about the Vikings as much as we talk about the Eagles on this show. Matthew Stafford left with a thumb injury. We're still waiting to hear if it was a sprain or a ligament tear. Watching him try to pop his thumb back into place was almost scary. Like, it was weird how he was doing it. There was like a sense of urgency there. I didn't like anything I watched when that happened. Kenny Pickett left the game with a rib injury, and Pittsburgh does have a Thursday game, so you can expect him to miss week 9. Tyrod Taylor left the game with a rib injury and had to stay overnight at a local New York hospital. Daniel Jones is already hurt. I already forget the name of the kid they brought in, but
Tommy DeVito,
and they didn't let him throw a pass. Good Lord.
We'll get to that one a little bit too.
Yeah, what is the state of NFL teams in that same game? Darren Waller aggravated a hamstring injury. Josh points out that a 30-plus-year-old player with a hamstring issue, there's going to be some missed time, and this brings us back to It's the Keenan Allen joke that we have had forever. This is now a 5 to 13 week injury. So we're going to see how that goes. Drake London leaves with a groin injury. And then there was some debate over what happened with Desmond Ridder. Some outlets are reporting a concussion. Others are just reporting it as a benching, but Taylor Heineke ended up taking over in this game. And then Kendrick Bourne leaves with a knee injury. Devontae Parker left the game with a concussion, as if the Patriots needed to lose any more wide receivers. Josh, you did a great job with the injuries this week. I had nothing to add to the list. So fantastic job, my friend.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Through finishing everything up last night, and I'm like, you know what? I got time to do these injuries. Let me just do that because I took a nap at 8:00 last night when I got home from work.
What's funny is I missed the Kendrick Bourne injury, so I have a joke later on in the show where I say, go sign Kendrick Bourne. I'll have to come up with another player name. So I saved.
I already got it for you. It's DeMario Douglas.
Okay, perfect. There we go. I love it. All right, Josh, you've been waiting. The people have been waiting. It's up with the Birds. Let's talk about that game at Washington.
Hey, 7-1. Sometimes the wins are ugly, but they happen. But here's what it's just so baffling to me, and I feel like it's just an extension of the Super Bowl. Eric Bieniemy, as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, figured out how to beat this Eagles defense. The Commanders, with Eric Bieniemy at offensive coordinator, have scored 62 points against the Eagles in 2 games this year.
Good Lord. Well, I just saw
because their defense is so bad, they're 0-2.
Well, I just saw a stat that over their last 4 games, the combined score is 87 to 86, and Washington actually has more points.
So yeah, Philly scored 34 in the first matchup, which we won in overtime, 38 in this one. I just want to give it up. Hats off to Sam Howell. He's been a bit of a roller coaster this year. He's had some highs of highs. He's definitely had some lows. Easily the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. And hats off to that Washington offensive line, because they kept the stout Eagles defensive line in check for 3+ quarters, which is not easy to do. Jalen Carter was a little banged up heading into this game. They did not get much interior pass rush, but hats off to Fletcher Cox for holding it down as I don't even want to call it a replacement. He was just like, hey, my old bones can get 1 game, but you young bucks got to carry the rest of the season.
There you go.
But Sam Howell, back to him, quarterback 1 on the week, 38.98 fantasy points. There were some throws that he made, specifically the 2 touchdown passes, one to Logan Thomas, the other to Jamison Crowder. That dude threaded a needle that very few quarterbacks in the NFL are making that throw.
Yeah.
He put that where only his guys could get it. And hats off to them because they got it. So kudos to Sam Howell. Great performance really by him. He had obviously the crucial strip sack from Hassan Reddick later in the fourth quarter, and then the big interception by Reed Blankenship. And that's what we talk about all the time. And I've harped on this with Jalen Hurts throughout the season. You cannot turn the ball over and expect to win games. And that's what happened here with Sam Howell. Those crucial mistakes in crunch time are ultimately what cost this game for the Commanders, outside of the fact they could not stop A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. But Terry McLaurin continues to kill the Eagles. 53 catches, 784 yards, 3 touchdowns in 9 career games against Philly heading into this matchup. Another 5 for 63 and a touchdown. Why can we not stop him? I do not understand why. I thought we had a Pro Bowl corner. Not 1, but 2 in Darius Slay and James Bradbury, and we still cannot stop Terry McLaurin. It annoys the crap out of me. And speaking of, Jahan Dotson finally decided to show up with his numbers. I have a feeling a lot of that had to do with the Curtis Samuel game time decision, the injury that he was dealing with. Regardless, I'll take it. Give me an opportunity to move Jahan Dotson right now, because as long as Curtis Samuel is healthy, he's that number 2 guy in that offense, in my opinion. But back to the Eagles defense. It's bend, don't break, it feels like. They expended all their energy to stop the high-flying Dolphins that they said, Commanders, whatever. They did just enough. And the closer, Hassan Reddick, I was joking with some Eagles fans at the bar last night. Dude is the closer. And I read an article about how much Hassan Reddick doesn't like that nickname, which I didn't even realize was a nickname for him.
Oh.
But you know what? He shows up in crunch time, and I'll take it. Relentless pass rush all game long. Finally got a one-on-one matchup in the fourth quarter with 2:15 left. Strip sack on Sam Howell. Closed out the game for us, essentially. Hats off to Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, 319, 4 touchdowns for Hurts. Another fumble, which don't love it, but no interceptions. Didn't totally cost us, so I'll take that. But A.J. Brown in the history books, first wide receiver in NFL history with 6 straight games of 125-plus receiving yards. Devonta Smith finally caught a touchdown. Julio Jones gets in on the action, catches the touchdown. And then, of course, the fake brotherly shove, the DeAndre Swift run into the end zone. I have seen other teams, or at least one other team that has done this sort of like fake tush push kind of thing. And the Eagles have never done that. Now that they have, it's going to be very interesting to see how teams defend said brotherly shove, because we got all the ways to beat you now on this one play that apparently nobody can stop.
The fumble was on a QB sneak, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, at the end zone. Well, I think when I watched the replay, it looked like it was a bad snap, and I hate putting that on Jason Kelce, but it was clearly a miscommunication between Kelce and Hurts on when the snap would come.
And the announcer said that they thought that Washington timed out the snap and may have, when the ball started moving, may have been a part of that bad snap. So
could very well have been. But the one thing I know, 7-1, heading into a gauntlet of a stretch. Bring on them Cowboys, baby.
Yeah. Oh, be careful what you ask for after this week, Josh.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. They couldn't score against San Francisco. I'm not that worried.
Yeah. I can't let you just gloss over the fact that Jamison fucking Crowder scored a touchdown in this game, because
I said, that was a pinpoint throw by Sam Howell.
It was
pinpoint.
But you have been a Jamison Crowder hater for as long as we've known each other, I'm pretty sure.
He's at least an average wide receiver.
I say at least since he left Washington the first time, you've been very down on Jamison Crowder. But my goodness, I laughed very hard when even Jamison Crowder is getting in on scoring on your Philadelphia Eagles.
I'm telling you, it's a bend, don't break defense. I mean, when you haven't done anything in the NFL for 3 years, I'm sorry, the defense just isn't going to pay attention to you. It is what it is. But with Curtis Samuel being limited, Cole Turner, the tight end, being out, they spread the football around a lot in this game, the Commanders did. So hats off to Crowder for showing up and, showing that, hey, he deserves more opportunity.
Yeah, Sam Howell looking legit. Smarter people than us thought Sam Howell could have been a steal in last year's draft, and maybe they were right. We're going to take another shot of Rumplemints on the back of our friend Tootsie Pop here, who says that Kendrick Bourne tore an ACL. So good. God. Not what we want to hear when it comes to that one. And then we just have a lot of Vikings wallowing in the chat right now. Rachel, a Vikings fan. Jill's wife, a Vikings fan. So everybody kind of mourning the loss of the Vikings and talking about how this is the epitome of being a Vikings fan right now. And then Faith is just a mean-spirited person, and nobody needs to bring these types of things up. Cole Kmet outscored Travis Kelce this week. Fair enough. I do a very small podcast for my local league, and verbally beat down Cole Kmet so bad after his 0 game with the first game with Tyson Bagent that I talked someone into dropping him, and then he comes out and puts up like a top 10 week or whatever.
Oh my God. I'm going to get to this point a little bit later, but I had somebody that reached out to me and they were like, hey, I've got Trey McBride this week. I don't really love the matchup. And honestly, I did not either. The Ravens had going into this game the last 5 weeks.
But the matchup things are really starting to bite us in the ass.
It really is. And I remember, like, he showed me like who was available on waivers. And I remember seeing Cole Kmet, and I'm just like, why do I like this matchup for him this week? And I went through, I looked at the numbers, well, the Chargers numbers are inflated because they just got murdered by the Chiefs. So I'm like, all right, let's take this out. Take Travis Kelce out of the equation. They were like bottom 10 against tight ends heading into last week. And I'm like, Derwin James typically has played really well against tight ends. So maybe this isn't that great. And then, of course, I look at last week, wasn't even targeted by Tyson Bagent. So I'm like, all right, maybe these feelings are just not there. They're fabricated in some way, shape, or form. And so I pivoted even further off of that and said, go with Michael Mayer. Both freaking Kmet and McBride blow up, and I'm like, what the hell?
But Michael Mayer hasn't played yet.
He hasn't played yet. Correct. He hasn't played yet. But yeah, this is just like, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you see these fantasy analysts that are like, they go with their gut, and people always want some level of explanation. And it's like, just got a feeling, it is what it is. And then it happens and you're like, see, told you. But because you didn't have the requisite research to back it up, people are just like, oh, you're just lucky, blah, blah, blah. But then when you have the requisite research to back it up and it doesn't happen,
goes away.
Oh, trust the process, blah, 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 this and that. Like, fantasy is a game that is up and down, is crazy. We're doing our best. Quite honestly, we suck at this 70% of the time. So
exactly.
Thank you for following, though.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Hit subscribe while you're here. And Joe, definitely not ignoring you. This is literally a segment later in the show. So I'll get you back up on the screen. We're going to talk a lot more about the Vikings as the show progresses. But first, we're going to get into our shot of espresso. That is the quality performance that got the juices flowing this weekend, Josh. And surprisingly enough, Joshua Hudson starting with a Dallas Cowboy.
Dude, this hurt. Like, I'm texting you and I'm like, all right, I kind of think that CeeDee Lamb belongs on the graphic this week. And then I see, like, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Brown going off. And I'm just like, can I pivot from this? And I'm like, no, the dude scored 41 fantasy points this week. It's not happening. But I want to go back to last week. I can't remember if it was Monday or Wednesday.
I feel like it has to be Wednesday because I feel like we were just shitting on him the entire Wednesday show.
Yeah, I think it might have been Wednesday. We got a question in our YouTube chat, and they specifically asked us, would you prefer Jakobi Meyers or CeeDee Lamb rest of season in standard scoring? Now,
Probably
keep in mind, this is standard scoring, okay? CeeDee Lamb has been all yards and catches. He's got a couple touchdowns here and there. It has been very hard.
No, he had one touchdown, Josh. He had
one touchdown heading into this week. Okay. Jakobi Meyers has like what feels like 15 touchdowns. He scored like a touchdown every week. Yeah, we kind of started to lean towards Jakobi Meyers. Egg on our face because apparently we are not good at this.
Well, let's also be clear. We weren't saying drop CeeDee Lamb instead of...
No, it wasn't that. No, it's just who we specifically prefer in that scoring format going forward. But this offense is literally CeeDee Lamb, and that's it. Tony Pollard, who I'm going to get to later, is a complete enigma at this point. Yeah. But 14 targets for CeeDee Lamb this week. The next closest had 4. The Cowboys are starting to feel like, you know what? We ain't got nobody else on this team that can do anything. Let's take a page out of the Eagles book and just hyper-target our best player. And it's working. 12 catches, career high, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns in the game. Added a 12-yard rush to the stat line as well. As I mentioned, 41 points. The wide receiver 1 on the week. This is why we can't sleep on talent. At a certain point, it will come and show itself and reveal it for who it is. CeeDee Lamb is mega talented.
Yep.
The Cowboys just took them 8 fucking weeks to figure it out. Get this man the football.
It goes back to something I said, and hilariously enough, not about the Cowboys, Josh, was let's bet on these teams coming off of their bye weeks. And I was so into the Texans and I was into the Bengals, and that was right. And like there were a lot of teams where I'm like, they're coming off their bye, they're going to be good. I never said that about the Cowboys, and woof, I was wrong. I was the lowest on Lamb on the show because I fall into my numbers. I'm a numbers guy. And I'm like, oh, the Rams are a funnel defense. And Jake Ferguson did score a touchdown. Great for my stream of the week.
4 for 47, yeah.
CeeDee Lamb also scored 3 when I predicted him to score. Cheerio. So that didn't work out real well for me. So, no. CeeDee Lamb.
2 touchdowns, right? Not 3.
Oh, I thought he had 3. Okay. No, regardless, a lot of fucking fantasy points. When I said he was not going to have a great week, another guy with a lot of fantasy points, and as pointed out in one of our league group chats, possibly all in the final drive of the game, Trey McBride, Josh.
I have a dynasty league that is and you're in this one. It's our club fantasy dynasty league. I'm like, this team is so freaking stacked, but tight end is just kind of like my eyesore right now. And I love Dallas Goedert, but he's becoming an afterthought in this offense and is very matchup dependent. I have Trey McBride. I'm very tempted to start trotting out Trey McBride as my starting tight end and just setting it and forgetting it because, oh my God.
Well, here's what I love, Josh.
His list of targets the last 5 games.
Real quick before you get into that, the hive mind of club fantasy. I have Dallas Goedert in a couple of dynasty leagues and I have Trey McBride in all of those leagues as well. So.
Hey, when you hang out with smart people, you
there you go.
A few things. Last 5 weeks of targets for Trey McBride. 1, 3, 5, 6, 14.
Which means next week is 19 probably, because he's improving every week.
Over his last 3 weeks, from week 6 to 8, Trey McBride is the tight end 5.
Whew.
And I want to give a shout out to our buddy Mike Garay, Dynasty Zoltan FF on Twitter, for throwing this tweet out there this morning, and that's what caused me to catch this. But yeah, first full week of Zach Ertz on IR, Trey McBride gets 14 targets and 10 catches, 95 yards and a touchdown. Currently the tight end 1 on the week. He is a talented kid. He's a small school kid. So some people kind of doubted him, and the tight end class being, weaker last year, et cetera, et cetera. This is what happens with good tight ends. They will find a way to pop. It's happening. It's popping. Trey McBride, tight end 1 the rest of the season. I'm calling it.
You're forgetting that he was the number 1 ranked tight end in his draft class. Just because the NFL was down doesn't mean he was necessarily down. We're seeing the same thing with Sam Howell.
Well, and again, it helps that, when you're on an offense, that you really only have one dominant piece, which, and I hesitate to use the word dominant because I don't believe Hollywood Brown is dominant, but he can command a target share because there ain't much else in that offense right now, especially with James Conner on IR.
Yep.
Michael Wilson, still a rookie, still figuring things out. He's going to have his pop weeks. But right now, it's Hollywood Brown and Trey McBride in this offense.
Yeah. I think it's super fair. Well, go get him for sure. This might be the first week, Josh, we feature a tight end on my pick him up as the number 1 pickup, because
I like it.
I feel like he has to be, plain and simple, and his rostership is obscenely low, is what I recall. But more importantly, Josh, and you didn't really get on this, he's done all of that. We're 3 weeks away from Kyler Murray coming back in here. And if you believe in the talent of Kyler Murray, and how could you not believe in him over Josh Jacobs? No offense, but come on. I think we see this offense improve, and that could mean the world to Trey McBride.
I was going to say, keep in mind, like I said, Connor on IR, coming back, designated to come back. Kyler Murray coming back.
They should get Connor and Murray back in the same week, now that I think about it. So
you get all these pieces back. You still have Hollywood Brown. You feature Trey McBride more, gives a little bit more time for Michael Wilson as the wide receiver 2. The offensive line has made some improvements. You now have a featured left tackle in Paris Johnson Jr.
Yeah.
This offense could be sneaky good down the stretch.
The question is, do they want to
defense? And that's the thing. The defense has gotten better.
They really have.
Bringing Budda Baker back off IR was like godsend for this defense.
So at 1-7, Josh, do we think they move anybody, or do we think they continue on? Let's stay the course.
I think right now it's let's stay the course,
because they have 24 hours.
You still have 2 first-round picks next year. You have your own. You have the Texans. So I don't think it's really a sense of suck for a quarterback. Like you're financially invested in Kyler Murray, right? Yeah. You need to see how he's going to fit within this system before you make any level of, commitment down the line or decision on what to do with him and whether you eat that contract, hit the reset button, etc. You still have to build this team around this new coaching staff, this new GM, right? They're fitting the pieces. Osen Ford, I believe is his last name, made a lot of trade backs, ended up moving back and then back up to get Paris Johnson, still sitting with the 2 first-round picks for next year, is going to have a lot of leeway to move up and down the board next year as a result, because those 2 picks are likely going to be top 13, top 15 picks. Yeah. So you've got an ability to, if you wanted to move back in the first round, pick up additional draft capital later, continue to stockpile for 2025, as well as you build this entire roster around what Jonathan Gannon and this coaching staff want to do. There's a lot of directions that they can go. Are they going to go all in on this year? No, because they're just not that good.
Well, there's nothing they can do at 1-7.
Yeah. No, there's nothing you can do at 1-7 right now. Could you reel off realistically 8 straight wins? I'm not saying it's impossible. Simulations aren't going to.
I'll say it's impossible.
Okay. Highly improbable is what I would
Yes,
say.
There you go.
Because that's more accurate. But it doesn't, they need to just figure out, does this system work? Do the pieces that we have in this system, do they work? That's really what the rest of this season needs to be for the Cardinals, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Josh, I'm going to keep you going here. I agree with everything you're saying there, but let's talk a little bit about Will Levis, because we talked about, Trey McBride is a guy who nobody wanted because of his draft capital. Will Levis had the draft capital, but nobody wanted him.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy that nobody wanted in the first round, and we kept saying, look, he's got the arm, he's got this. Don't fault him because he puts mayonnaise in his damn coffee. Like,
shout out to Tara. Shout out to It's Tara time.
Oh, that poor girl. I'm so sorry for her. Yeah, I mean, 29 pass attempts, I believe. So not like they're not saying, hey, go out and sling it. Like, we always knew what the Titans want to be. They want to be a team that plays good defense, even though their defense sucks, and run the football and control the clock. They need a quarterback that's not going to make mistakes and then can make the throws when needed. Well, you saw on full display this week, Will Levis has an arm. He can sling it.
Yeah. 2
touchdown passes over 30 yards. The first to DeAndre Hopkins, which I believe was a 60-yarder, and then the 33-yard touchdown pass to Nick Westbrook Achane, but 238 overall, 4 touchdown passes, only the third quarterback in NFL history to have 4 passing touchdowns in his debut. 3 of those touchdown passes went to DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not ready to say, hey, he's the starter the rest of the season, even though I think he should be, clearly. There's going to be a lot of talk in the coming days with the trade deadline. I believe it's Tuesday at 4. What they do with Ryan Tannehill. Do they move him? Has Levis kind of cemented his status as a starter for this team the rest of the season? But there's also a lot of talk that DeAndre Hopkins might get moved. If DeAndre Hopkins gets moved, I don't know that we have the same level of upside with Will Levis, because they're not even targeting Treylon Burks right now.
So here's what I'll say. I think there is upside because of his willingness to throw the ball down the field, which is something we haven't seen from Ryan Tannehill in the last 18 games or so. It's been really ugly for Ryan Tannehill. His willingness to throw the ball. But what we are not going to see is the level of success, because it's a lot different chucking it down to Nick Westbrook Achane than it is DeAndre Hopkins.
Oh, 100%. 100%. But yeah, I mean, and again, we talk about this all the time. What helps a young quarterback develop? A damn good wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins, a damn good wide receiver. I would like to see DeAndre Hopkins stick around with the Titans just to help Will Levis's development. But I understand where the Titans are right now as a franchise. It would make a ton of sense for them to move DeAndre Hopkins let Will Levis try to develop some level of rapport with Treylon Burks, because then you as a franchise can then determine, hey, Treylon Burks is our guy, or shit, we should not have traded A.J. Brown to get this guy because Treylon Burks isn't it. You know what I mean? So
someone was talking about how mad they were after trading A.J. Brown.
Well, especially watching him set NFL records in Philly right now.
Exactly. So no, I love that. Josh, we're not doing great on time, so I'm going to have you go through and just do your honorable mention as well.
We're fine on that. I'm going to run through this one quick. Hey, congrats to the Denver Broncos. 17 straight losses to the Chiefs. You want to talk about the old throwback to like Pedro Martinez in baseball, saying the Yankees were his daddy? Yeah, the Chiefs were the Broncos' daddy. And the Broncos finally got one up their daddy this week. Hats off to them. Great game plan. They absolutely shut down Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense. The Chiefs are going to be a team to watch. It is clear as day. They need a legitimate wide receiver 1. And if they are not calling the Titans about DeAndre Hopkins, they should be.
I would just like to point out that when this all got started, I said DeAndre Hopkins to the Chiefs when he became a free agent. And I would like to see
he needed to be. They were just being cheap. They didn't want to pay, the upfront salary. That's why making trades midseason can help, because that salary, whatever he signed for, is now prorated over the course of the rest of the season.
Not the Chiefs' problem. For me, Josh, I really want to talk about Christian McCaffrey touchdown streak, just because I don't feel like we've addressed it whatsoever on the show so far. I saw a betting stat that said if you would put $100, he's at 17 straight games now, folks. If you would put $100 on an anytime touchdown at the beginning of this streak and rolled the winnings week after week, your initial bet of $100 would be worth $750,000 after this weekend's touchdown. Then I wanted to see what he's done in the last games as a 49er. He scored touchdowns in 18 of 21 games as a San Francisco 49er and 21 of 27 games since the start of the 2022 season, going back to his time with the Carolina Panthers. 29 total touchdowns, Josh, since the beginning of 2022. So it is remarkable what we are seeing from Christian McCaffrey. And I feel like the fact that we've not brought it up on the show probably one time, we're just jaded and spoiled, and we don't realize what we have in what we're seeing.
It's true. Like everybody that was trying to make the case for the wide receivers over the running back in fantasy drafts, like when you have a running back like Christian McCaffrey, that is what sets the tone in fantasy football. Plain and simple.
And my favorite part is he still gets the injury prone moniker. He'll be great for 3 games and then you got to cut him. And I'm like, I watched people say this dumb shit during the draft process. And I'm like, he played 17 games last year, like did not miss a week. And then his continued.
And played one on literally 2 days with his new team. Like,
yeah,
come on.
And like, this feels like Keenan Allen all over again, and obviously running back, wide receiver, but people wanted to call Keenan Allen injury prone for years after he just kept putting up the numbers. Yep. And it's ridiculous. Rachel, I know you probably didn't do it because of my article, but I have had Gus Edwards in this article for about a month straight where I'm like, why don't people, I think my last blurb was, why don't people want the Ravens running backs? Like, it makes no sense.
I talked about it on Wednesday. The Cardinals suck against running backs.
You did.
Partly why I like Lamar Jackson, who didn't even run on Sunday. But
yeah, that's right. Yeah, when you referred to him as a running back, great job. But my thing that pisses me off is we have a nice little DFS contest here at Club Fantasy. You'll find links in all of our DFS articles to play with us. And Rachel actually asked, should we pivot off of Mahomes with this stomach bug? And I said I was pivoting because of the weather, which ended up being a non-factor. But I pivoted to Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. I should have just pivoted to Gus, and everything would have been way better. But I didn't even have to pivot to Gus. When I had Mahomes and Kelsey, I had Gus in my lineup, and then I took him out to play Lamar. It couldn't have went worse. It was one of my worst weeks of DFS, very simply. But kudos to Rachel for riding the Gus bus to what is likely a win. Congratulations. We're going to get to the morning mimosa now. Josh, it's that tingly feeling that something great is on the horizon. And I know there's a player here that you have just been waiting to talk about.
What are we on? Week 8 now?
Yeah.
About damn time I finally get to say Diontae Johnson, baby.
Took a little time.
Took some time. Hamstring injury notwithstanding. But that hamstring injury led everybody to hop on the George Pickens bandwagon. They said George Pickens is him. He's so great at this. He's so great at that. He still doesn't separate. He's great at 50-50 balls. He still doesn't separate. That is what separates Diontae Johnson from George Pickens. Diontae Johnson gets like 5 yards of separation. Yes, I understand it being a little facetious here. But 14 targets this week for Diontae Johnson. 8 for 85. And that's with 2 different quarterbacks. He is the wide receiver 1 in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. There is no question, no debate. George Pickens can score the touchdowns, and that's exactly what he did this week on 1 catch. That was it. That's all he had. Trubisky at quarterback, Pickett at quarterback, whomever. The ball is going to Diontae Johnson. Stop worrying about him. He's not going to be a high touchdown production guy. It has never been his game. But it's also just not the Steelers offense because the Steelers offense sucks. But if I can get a target hog in my fantasy lineup as my wide receiver 2, I'm going to do that 100 times out of 100. Give me Diontae Johnson. Give me someone like Garrett Wilson, who I will get to in a little bit.
Yeah. So when it comes to Diontae Johnson, you said you're not worried about Mitch Trubisky at all.
No.
Okay.
Not. He's the first read in the offense. He's going to be the first read on every single pass play.
Yeah, and I think that makes a really good point that when it comes to it, you're going to have a quarterback, and this is going to come up later. So backup quarterbacks tend to lean on their first target, and I think we're going to likely see that same thing.
I mean, Trubisky did the same thing in Chicago with Allen Robinson.
Yeah,
he leans on the first read in the offense, the best player in the offense. That's Diontae Johnson.
No, perfect. And you think we maybe buried Zack Moss a little bit too early, Josh?
No, I think you buried Zack Moss a little too early.
No, it was a collective thing.
Yes, JT is good. 12 carries, 95 yards in this game. All of that came in the first half of this game. Every single last bit of it. JT is still going to get his run. Even if he ends up finding a way to get 55% of the total carries, which essentially he did this week, Zack Moss is going to get the other 45.
Yeah.
And Zack Moss is going to do something with it. 11 carries, 66 yards this week, and scored the lone touchdown between the running backs. This system that Shane Steichen has is built for running backs.
Yeah.
They will succeed in this system. There is plenty of run for both Jonathan Taylor if he decides to bust out, have the long run, the long touchdown runs, scoring through the air, whatever it may be, and he puts up 25 fantasy points. Zack Moss can be right behind him with 15, and you are more than happy to start that as your RB2 in most weeks.
Yeah, I think I was probably wrong. And what we're starting to see, it kind of reminds me of before Shane Steichen got there, where Jonathan Taylor did all his work between the 20s and then was so damn tired, they brought in Nyheim Hines and the kid's name, who I forget right now, who got hurt, but they would always go to the next
Jordan
back.
Wilkins?
Yeah, no. The guy, God, I can't think of the one who came in with Jonathan Taylor, where they were worried if Jonathan Taylor was actually going to take the job from him. I just forget the guy's name. Tore his Achilles.
Oh, Marlon Mack.
Marlon Mack, there you go. Yeah, to where they would always bring in Mack or Nyheim Hines because Taylor did all the work for 60 yards. And they're like, okay, now you're tired. We're going to give it to somebody else. That's exactly what's happening with Moss. But Moss also broke off that like 60-yard run, 50-yard run. So the kid looks way better than what I expected him to. And I certainly buried him way too early. And Josh, I think there's a really good point to be made that maybe everybody, especially our co-host Joe Zolo, was ready to bury Quentin Johnston just a little bit too early.
Look, 5 for 50. It's not the most glaringly like outstanding stat line, but when Quentin Johnston has done like literally nothing since 5 for 50, I will celebrate. I'm not going to say that I'm like the lone Quentin Johnston truther on the face of fantasy football Twitter and in the fantasy football space, but I'm okay saying, you know what? He's just a raw wide receiver, and we miscast him as a 1-for-1 replacement for Mike Williams. They are two completely different wide receivers. Quentin Johnston is built very similarly in the, Treylon Burks mold, where, it's a quick catch and pop and let you do the yards after the catch. It's very Deebo Samuel-esque. You're not going to ask Deebo Samuel to run a lot of traditional wide receiver routes because he's not built that way. That's not how he succeeds in the NFL.
And Mike
Williams get him in space.
I was going to say Mike Williams isn't a yak guy because he's on the ground after he jumps up to make every
exactly.
Catch,
he makes the contested catches. Quentin Johnston has to use his speed. Yes, he can get down the field and he can make some of those types of plays, sure, but he's very raw as a route runner. And I think what truly helped him this game was the defense that the Chicago Bears run is god awful, so it helps, create space for him. But Josh Palmer being questionable heading up into this game, who left the game early as well.
And then hurt in the game.
Gerald Everett being ruled out heading into this game, that opened up some target share for him. And at the end of the day, Kellen Moore schemed the right scheme to get Quentin Johnston the football and let him do what he does well. Getting Austin Ekeler going was also a huge help because that creates some space in the middle of the field there where he has some room to run once he catches the football. This game set up perfectly for Quentin Johnston as well as the aftermath. So now Kellen Moore has the tape and can go through and say, all right, these are the types of things that I need to do to get our first round pick involved in this matchup. Josh Palmer is a very good wide receiver. He can stretch the field the way that Mike Williams can stretch the field. When you have somebody on your team that can do that, that is going to create space for players like Quentin Johnston, Austin Ekeler, etc., to do the things that they do underneath and within that 0 to 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. And then they can turn those into yards after the catch.
No, I think it's a really good point. And I don't want to get too bought into this Chargers game after one game of beating up on the Bears. But as someone who was very, very high on Kellen Moore and the Chargers, man, was it happy to see Austin Ekeler finally involved. Josh, you alluded to it. 8 targets, caught 7 balls for a touchdown. I think it was 92 yards, something along those lines.
Yeah, 92, 94 or something like that.
Yeah, I forgot to put it in my notes, but 7 balls, 92 yards and a touchdown. This is what we need from Austin Ekeler. I don't care that he averaged 2.9 yards a carry. I'll take
1.9 yards per carry.
I don't care. if it was 0.9 yards per carry, because targets are what matters and it's his game. And someone corrected me. I think it was actually Joel on Saturday that maybe Austin Ekeler was more of an injury thing than I was giving it credit for, because it felt to me like it was like trending towards a bad fit in the offense. But again, I think Kellen Moore needed some time to figure out how to use his weapons. And now with Palmer going down, I think we're going to see more targets funnel to Austin Ekeler. And for fantasy purposes, this is all you want. So if you were one of those folks that bought cheap and hopefully didn't sell cheap, even though we were all telling you to do so, I think this works out well for you. And then this one is just strictly for me and Julia Papworth, maybe, just maybe, and it's a big maybe Khalil Shakir is on the verge of actually doing something in the NFL. Buffalo has desperately needed a third wide receiver to step up. And for a while, it looked like it was going to be Deontay Hardy coming back from the grave. But Khalil Shakir this week caught 6 of 6 balls for 92 yards. With Dawson Knox out, it looks like this target tree is starting to thin and become more clear, where we know Stephon Diggs is at the top. We know Gabe Davis's role. And now Dalton Kincaid has his own role. And I think that has developed into getting Khalil Shakir his own role. And I'm going to be very interested, Josh, to see how he progresses moving forward, because obviously at least 2 of us, me and Julia Papworth, would like to see him do very, very well as people who were very high on him last year.
Yeah, I like Shakir. I think he's built to be an NFL slot receiver, But what really kind of hamstrung him was when they spent that first round pick on Dalton Kincaid, who's not an inline blocking tight end.
Nope.
What is Shakir's role, right? And just like you said, the target tree is starting to thin a little bit. We know like the top 4 pass catching options. Well, I guess really 5 when you include James Cook, who didn't get a ton of targets in this last game on Thursday.
A very quiet game for him.
So, if you're trying to use James Cook as strictly just a running back and not out of the backfield, that's another miscast use of talent. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So, but at the end of the day, for me with Shakir, unless Josh Allen has thrown the football 40 plus times, he's a best ball guy. He's a dart throw in a GPP lineup and DFS.
Speaking of which,
there you go.
Rachel said her best ball teams are very happy that Shakir time is coming. And Joe Ortiz, I think, singing the song of our people, the fantasy managers who had to play against Austin Ekeler and for Austin Ekeler. So
there you
got
go.
him a win, caught him an L. I'll never forget. I think it was week 1 last year or 2 years ago. I had a situation where if Keenan Allen scored fewer than 7 points, I would win a game, but lose in another league. If he scored more than 8 points, I would win in the one league, but lose in the other league. He scored 7.5, and I lost in both leagues. And I was like,
God, that's the worst.
I was like, this shouldn't even statistically be possible unless he was out to get me completely. And that is exactly what happened. It was pure and ugly. Josh, let's get into the hangover, because we have a lot to talk about here. You've actually been teasing this for a while. You have some good ones, and then I think the topic of the show might come in this category as well. These are our biggest head scratchers of the week, things that just leaving us a little bit confused, Josh.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't leave me so much confused as probably the rest of the fantasy community, because you've been doing shows with me now for how many years? This is what happens when you try to plug efficient running backs into heavy use roles.
It used to be the tagline of the show, people.
They're not built to be every down feature backs. Tony Pollard, in 3 of his last 4 games, has scored under 10 fantasy points. And he scored 6.5 points this week. This just is not the look for him. You can harp on how bad Ezekiel Elliott was last year all you want, but at a 220, 225 pounds, he wore down the front defensive lines. And last year, Tony Pollard, when running in those middle lanes between the tackles, he averaged 5.3 yards per carry and scored 6 touchdowns on 83 rush attempts because the defense was already worn down. We know how efficient he was last year. That's what led the Cowboys to franchise tagging him and saying, you know what? Let's give you a chance to be the feature guy. This year, over the first 6 games, and I'm not going to include week 7 simply because stats haven't uploaded yet on the site that I use, but also he only had 12 carries, so it really wouldn't have changed anything very much. 6 games, 51 rush attempts, 189 yards, and 1 touchdown. 3.7 yards per carry in the same rushing formations.
Yep.
This is what happens when you put efficient backs in featured between the tackles running roles. They struggle. They're not built for it. It is okay to be good along the edges. We like that. We don't need every single running back to have 25 plus touches. That is a fantasy mantra of yesteryear. It needs to die.
Yeah.
It's okay. We can accept 10 carries, 90 yards, and a touchdown.
100%.
I'm fine with it. Okay. Tony Pollard, this just is not it. And another stat that's probably going to blow your freaking mind. Last year, Pollard had 41 forced missed tackles over the season. Through those 6 games, 7.
Jesus. So he's on pace for half.
He's on pace for half as many forced missed tackles.
With
Tony
probably
Pollard
double
is
the
not
touches.
A featured back. Tony Pollard is not a featured back. But what makes this even more concerning, because we all love how good he is as a receiver, the Cowboys of late haven't even been using him in that role.
Nope.
They've been force-feeding CeeDee Lamb because nobody else works.
Yeah, because Pollard is too tired from getting smacked in the middle of the field every damn play.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's not how you should be using these backs. And like I said, it was the tagline of the show because we got so many weird questions about it last year, Josh. Backup running backs are supposed to be more efficient. That is how I used to close this show every single week because everyone's like, Pollard's better than Zeke. And insert every other run. No, they were supposed to get 5 more yards. But it's also the reason I was right about hating Alexander Mattison coming into this season because he sucked as a backup running back. And now you want to give him volume? Like, this is
well, in fairness, his role as a backup was I'm going to take advantage of the Detroit Lions' shitty run defense.
That's a good point. Yeah. His role as a backup was 2 games a season. So, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Josh, you're ready to expose some frauds. And I think you could make some enemies in the league this year.
Oh, I really thought about putting this on Twitter, but I also know that people were going to come for me. I said, you know what? I'm just going to save this for the show. If I need to cut the clip, I will cut the clip. I don't give a shit. But Brock Purdy and this 49ers offense, they have lost 3 games in a row. Deebo Samuel left in the first game. We know the issues that have happened on this offense in the first loss of that season, you know, losing Christian McCaffrey, losing Deebo Samuel, losing Trent Williams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a fun stat that I found during the broadcast of this game. Kyle Shanahan, as a head coach, is over when trailing by 8 or more points heading into the fourth quarter. He does not know how to come from behind to win a football game.
Yeah.
That is fraudulent behavior from the so-called greatest play caller in all of football. Okay? I've been preaching this from the mountaintops or from the desk chair in my bedroom for God knows how long now. Kyle Shanahan is overrated. He can scheme the best offensive scheme all he wants. Best system ever. He knows how to get playmakers in space. He can drop whomever he wants to at quarterback, and they can run the system. They can't do anything else. When crunch time comes through, they can't win football games. They cannot do it. Brock Purdy, when leading in the second half as starter, completed 74% of his passes, 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 129.5 QB rating. When trailing in the second half, and this lends credence to my Kyle Shanahan stat, 60% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 72.2 quarterback rating. It's almost like when you try to fit a backup quarterback as your starting quarterback, things go haywire when you don't have that much talent around you. Kyle Shanahan's ego is going to be the demise of the San Francisco 49ers. This is not me saying that Trey Lance was the answer, because I don't know if he was, because he never developed, because he kept getting hurt, and they gave up on him too quickly. I'm also not saying that Brock Purdy can't be a good quarterback, because every quarterback will find struggles. They all do. I've harped on Jalen Hurts this year for his struggles. Jalen Hurts has elite talents. Brock Purdy does not.
He does not.
Brock Purdy is an average, above average quarterback that happens to fit well in a system. But when it comes down to it, Brock Purdy will not win you games.
And he certainly lost you a game against the Cincinnati Bengals. So.
Exactly. They are now second in their own division. Let that sink in, 49ers fans. I'm off my soapbox now.
No, I think you bring up some really good points. I'm not going to go as far. You made a comment that a backup quarterback doesn't work when there's not a lot of talent around him. I think there's plenty of talent.
But the point is, when that talent gets hurt, there's now no more talent. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Because if Christian McCaffrey goes down, what happens? He played 97% of the snaps yesterday. He's been consistently over 90% of those snaps.
Well, yeah, the week where they said they weren't going to use him very much, he played 100% of the snaps.
Yeah, exactly. They cannot survive without Christian McCaffrey. Brandon Ayuk is fantastic. Love him. If he gets hurt, they do not have a number one wide receiver.
If he gets hurt, just wrap it up. Like, it's over.
Deebo Samuel has been out. They can't utilize the middle of the field now.
Yeah.
And then when you have to run George Kittle, who was fantastic yesterday, when you have to run him more as a receiving option, you don't have that extra offensive lineman to block, and the right side of their line has struggled this year.
Yeah. It's no good. No good whatsoever. And they got exposed. Like I said, we made comments where I want to see how Detroit bounces back tonight because Detroit got exposed last week. And I want to see the same thing out of San Francisco. And Josh, you had a nice little blurb in here about
I just think this is funny.
Taysom
9
Hill.
for 63, 2 touchdowns for Taysom Hill.
Short yardage back Taysom Hill.
Short yard. This is why they brought in Jamal Williams, right? What happened?
Absolutely ridiculous. So I've been teasing. Throw that in there. Yeah, I loved it. I've been teasing this for the entire show, and I decided to use my head scratcher this week for a genuine conundrum, and that is, what do the Minnesota Vikings do now? So Rachel, maybe you could chime in here and help us out a little bit too. So they're 4-4. They're likely 2 games behind Detroit after Detroit bounces back in what I expect tonight, but they're still tied for the wild card spot right now, Josh. On roster, they have Jaren Hall, Nick Mullins, and Sean Mannion. I think Mannion is on the practice squad. Jaren Hall, Nick Mullins, and Sean Mannion. Jaren Hall is their 5th round pick this year coming out of BYU. I went to my own rankings and looked at the backup quarterbacks that I think are available in the next 24 hours. And so the names I want to throw out at you, Josh, is first and foremost, I want to ask you, do they move for a quarterback? And then would you go for one of these names? So this is where I'm starting. Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis. I think Tennessee would be a fool not to part with at least one of them. Jacoby Brissett out of Washington. Clearly, Sam Howell has won the job. Jameis Winston is not being used in New Orleans whatsoever. Davis Mills was one I found interesting. He has starting experience, more starting experience than anyone currently on their roster, maybe equal with Nick Mullins, but probably more. And then the last wild card I wanted to throw out was John Wolford, who is currently the 3rd string in Tampa Bay. He was the Rams backup when Kevin O'Connell and their offensive coordinator, I think it's Wes Phillips, were in Los Angeles. So he knows their system. So my question to you is, Josh, are they buyers or should they be sellers? What would you do if you're the Vikings right now?
If I were the Vikings, I would be sellers. I would trade Danielle Hunter. I would say, you know what? This just isn't it. And I would sit down and have a long conversation with Justin Jefferson and be, you know what? We want you here in our future. Sit out the rest of the season. We don't want to risk you getting hurt. You don't want to risk losing your money. But I want to bring up Joel's comment here because
I was just going to say, I would have never thought of, sorry, Josh. I would have never thought to throw this out there. Kyler?
But here's the problem with trying to go out and get Kyler Murray. I don't think you have to give up a ton of draft capital to do so because of the size of his contract. But if you make the move to go get Kyler, do you then have enough money to sign Justin Jefferson long-term?
I mean, the salary cap's made up, so probably.
Well, sure, it is, and it can be, but not everybody has a wizard running their salary cap.
That's fair.
The way that the Eagles do and Howie Roseman. And that, to me, is the biggest issue, because you can defer and defer and defer and defer all the money you want. And by trading Kyler, a lot of that guaranteed money, like the signing bonuses and things like that, don't affect the Vikings cap as much as they would the Cardinals cap as a result. or at least that's what Madden has taught me over the years.
Yeah.
So this is it's a conundrum of sorts, but it also makes me wonder how they're going to be able to shape that defense. Because if you trade for Kyler, you almost certainly have to give up Danielle Hunter.
Yep.
Because there's no way that you can sign Hunter after this season as well. On top of Justin Jefferson, on top of manufacturing Kyler's salary. I think
I don't even know that the Cardinals would want Danielle Hunter, so they wouldn't give him up in the trade, but they're losing him long term if they bring Kyler in. So
yeah, I mean, and we like the Cardinals need a lot on defense still. Like they have Budda Baker, who seems to have kind of bought in with Jonathan Gannon, at least for now. Maybe they still make a move in the offseason. I don't know, but there's still some question marks there. The Vikings, to me, I don't know that this division is winnable, but seeing how Bears still aren't there yet, the Packers, whew, man. I actually, before I went in on the 49ers, I wrote a whole thing about the Packers. I was like, yeah, I beat that dead horse last week, so I'll just switch it up.
Even the Packers fans are down on the Packers right now, Joel. So yeah, we don't need any of that.
And it's really just kind of one of those, you lost your starting quarterback. Nobody ever likes to admit defeat, right? You don't want to say, damn, our season's done. Like, it is what it is. You want to be able to do what you can to compete because you have fans that have paid season tickets to come see the game and they don't want to see losing products. You have owners that, they're trying to get a return on their investment, right? If the team sucks, then people aren't showing up, not spending money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these trickle effects of the economics. But you have to be realistic with what this team is. You started to tear down process in the offseason. You jettisoned Adam Thielen, and I know there's a couple other Eric Kendricks, Zadarius Smith, some of those older veterans that you knew that you kind of needed to get rid of because their salary wasn't matching their production. Although Adam Thielen right now is proving that otherwise.
Yeah, I think his salary is matching his production perfectly.
Yeah, right. But you started that process. So losing your starting quarterback, to me, accelerates that process because you know that you have to get healthier in the salary cap. You know that you need to bring a youth movement into this team. You brought in Brian Flores because Brian Flores is very good about turning water into wine because he got that from Bill Belichick. He has a system that can make things work. And as bad as this Vikings defense was the first few weeks of the season, the first month of the season, they have turned it around. They've looked a lot better.
Yeah, 100%.
So I don't know that going out and getting Kyler is the answer. To me, I think they do a kind of a low risk type move. Maybe you make a trade for Jacoby Brissett. Davis Mills could definitely be one because he is still on a rookie contract and has starting experience. Walford obviously has the experience in the system. But maybe this is a time for them to say, you know what? Yeah, we did spend a 5th round pick, so we don't have a ton invested in Jaron Hall, but let's see what he's got. He's been in this system now all off season, first 8 weeks of the season. Let's see what he can do. Yeah. And if that tanks the season, then you know what? They're in a better position to be able to get one of the quarterbacks in this draft class that it's looking like a pretty good draft class this year.
So you hit one nail on the head, and I'm going to quickly throw Joe's comment up here. I thought about putting him on my list. I don't think there's a chance the Dolphins move him. Not with
Tua's history.
Yeah, exactly. So that great opinion. I thought it wasn't going to happen. I didn't even mean to put this up. I have no idea what it said. Oh, yeah. So there you go. So we definitely have seen better out of that. So Josh, you hit the nail on the head where you brought up you don't think Justin Jefferson should come back this season, and I am in agreement. So then the next question I want to ask you is about 3 players. Are you buying, selling, holding? How are you handling? Let's start with the rookie, Jordan Addison.
I will probably hold because right now his trade value for as good as he's been without Kirk Cousins, people are going to be skeptical. They're not going to give up equal value. So at that point, it doesn't make any sense to sell. I wouldn't be going out and buying, even though at this point, again, if without Justin Jefferson, he's going to be the first read in the offense. But we haven't seen, can he be the target commander that like a Diontae Johnson or a Garrett Wilson can be in that offense. And I mentioned those 2 specifically. So I'm holding and probably treating him more as a flex option going forward.
Gotcha. TJ Hawkinson.
I think I'm probably doing the same. It's a hold for me.
And then KJ Osborne. I don't even know if he needs to be brought up because he hasn't really done much, but now you're going into backup quarterback. He's probably a drop at this point, I would guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's a lot closer to drop than he is buy. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's definitely a different level of a question when it comes to KJ Osborne. So.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean, it's all like you can't realistically go out and buy any of them. I could maybe see TJ Hawkinson only because, with a backup quarterback, we say this all the time, that a tight end is their best friend. He typically has pretty low ADOT numbers anyway, and I don't see that changing. So in PPR leagues, I'm fine if you wanted to go out and buy because you're probably going to get them a little cheaper now that Kirk Cousins.
I think you get KJ Osborne dirt cheap right now. I think.
No, I'm talking about TJ Hawkinson.
Oh, my apologies. Okay.
No,
I heard the J. I was like,
zero desire to go buy TJ.
Yeah, I was like,
KJ Osborne.
Yeah. So. No, Hawkinson's interesting. I think you could see some sellers on Hawkinson. I don't think anybody's going to sell Jordan Addison. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I think there's probably it's worth flying a kite when it comes to TJ Hawkinson. Josh, in case anybody who hasn't caught on yet, this show's going way over. But let's get into our trade segment of the show. Cream or sugar? Cream rises to the top. They are our buy candidates. Sugar sinks to the bottom. We want to sell these guys. Who you got, Josh?
Yeah, this it's going to feel gross, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Like, the Jets offense, don't love it. But when Garrett Wilson over his last 4 weeks has 14 targets, 7, 12, and 13, I'm going to take it because even if he's catching half of those passes, you're still in pretty good PPR territory. And
it's the CeeDee Lamb thing. Wait till he hits 3 touchdowns.
Exactly. Like, wait till he gets that good matchup and then booms for the touchdowns. Like, that's what you want out of a wide receiver too.
100%.
Like, I'm going to take the great player as the wide receiver 1, the Lambs, the Chases, the Cups, Nakua, or whomever you want to put in that category, Tyreek Hill. Like, those are the guys you want as your wide receiver 1. Your wide receiver 2s, you want the consistent target volume. And once they start scoring touchdowns, that's the wide receiver 1 upside.
Yeah.
And that's Garrett Wilson. But you're going to have people that just want him off their team because he plays for the fucking Jets.
Yeah.
And they don't score touchdowns. Like,
100%.
It's a bad offense. So I'm okay going out and getting Garrett Wilson. He's not at this point, and really from week 1 on, he has not been the guy that you drafted him to be because you drafted him to be the wide receiver 1. It's just reality is set in. He is what he is right now. He's a wide receiver 2. You're not getting your return on investment.
And my sell candidates are going to play into Josh's buy candidate.
There you go.
I do want to quickly give a shout out since we're talking about buy low. Jordan Smith bought Austin Ekeler low, and now he's taking the dub, bringing Austin Ekeler into the team this week. Now
I will say, Ryan, it's going to tug at your heartstrings because he sold Keenan Allen to get him.
Here's the thing. Keenan Allen's rough to give up, but as you will soon hear about my sell candidate, wide receivers are not that tough to give up right now.
And quality running backs are very difficult to acquire. So Jordan, hats off, buddy.
No. And you bought a win. I don't care what you did. You bought a win, and you
at the
probably
end of the day, the wins matter. So,
and Josh, you have a bonus for us.
Yeah, Devon Achane, because people may have forgotten about him. He's just kind of chilling on his IR spot right now. But when you look at the state of the Dolphins, Raheem Mostert seems to be wearing down a little bit.
Yes, he does.
97 yards and a touchdown combined over the last 2 games. He's still getting the lion's share of the running back work. They're kind of splitting between Jeff Wilson and Salvin Ahmed. But when Achane returns, I think Ahmed's probably going to be the healthy scratch most weeks. And then you're just going to start to see Mostert slowly coming back down because Achane is just that much better because he's that much younger and just as efficient, if not more efficient.
Father Time is undefeated, and we cannot forget this about Raheem
And
Mostert.
The way that people are chasing wins right now, because you're in the middle of the season, it's make or break time, you probably don't need to pay top 5 running back value to get Achane because that's what he is, in my opinion. Top 5 running back. So.
I normally don't give our listeners a hard time, and I don't know if it's one of our actives but I happened to catch a comment that someone left on last week's Wednesday video that said we were approaching the Dolphins injury situation completely wrong, and that we should be more concerned about Tyreek than Raheem Mostert. Well, I know hindsight.
I think it was specifically for that episode.
Oh, I know.
When I mentioned, Tyreek being a little more cautious. But.
Well, I was going to say, no. But they made it out like we were not being serious enough about Tyreek and we were being too serious about Raheem Mostert. Well, we're going to pick on old guys. It's what we do. And
because we're old guys.
Yeah, and Tyreek came back the very next day. Hindsight's 2020, but I would say our flippantness to Tyreek's injury looks pretty good after he torches New England yet again.
Yeah, right.
So, I don't think we were necessarily wrong there. Josh, you got to sell for us as well.
Yeah, for me, this is JSN. Back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. But it's all about target distribution, right? Like, people fall in love with touchdowns, but when you're not on the field, you're not running that 11 personnel, JSN kicks back to the background. And they're using Jake Bobo quite a bit, especially in the red zone. He also had a touchdown this past week. But
third of the season for Jake Bobo, undrafted rookie free agent.
Yep. 14 targets for Metcalf, 9 for Lockett, only 4 for JSN. Yes, he caught 3 of them, 36 yards and the touchdown. You love that. But if you've been sitting and waiting for JSN, what you're sitting and waiting for aren't weeks like this. You're sitting and waiting for DK Metcalf and or Tyler Lockett to miss extended time. That is what you are waiting for. So for people that tend to just look at box scores and not pay attention to the full scope of the game, you can say, hey, look at this guy. He scored 2 straight touchdowns. You know you want him. Use that to get a more consistent wide receiver. Maybe, put him in a package deal to upgrade at running back because running back is so bad right now. That's what I would be doing with JSN. It's not because I don't believe in the talent. I just don't believe in the talent for 2023 because he's still behind Metcalf and Lockett.
Yeah, keep in mind when we do these buy sells, folks, we are talking redraft 2023. Do not come to us for your dynasty trade advice in this segment because
that's every other Sunday on Dynasty After Party.
There you go. I'm actually going to start with my sugar, Josh, because my cream is almost word for word your cream. But I'm going to say sell every mid-range wide receiver that you can if it can lead you to an upgrade. The wide receiver 20 in PPR fantasy football right now is averaging 13 points per game. The wide receiver 30 is averaging 12. Wide receiver 40 is averaging 11. The wide receiver 50 is averaging 10 points per game. That is a 30 wide receiver gap with a 3-point per game difference. And that's not even counting boom or bust weeks. This is literally a situation where wide receivers are putting up a ton of points and they're all doing it. So take a guy like JSN and combine him with another wide receiver, Cortland Sutton, and go get Garrett Wilson or go get Chris Olave. These guys who have a potential to be a top 10, a top 15 wide receiver, because those are the difference makers, or go get a running back, as we mentioned. In my notes, I said, after you get that free roster spot, because you're going to trade 2 for 1. You're going to trade 2 wide receiver 20s to go get a wide receiver 10. And then I said, go sign Kendrick Bourne, but don't go sign Kendrick Bourne because that's not going to work out for you. But there are wide receivers on your waivers right now that are putting up obscene amounts of points that if you use this correctly, you can trade a guy who's scoring the exact same amount of points as a guy you can get off of waivers. So that's the move I'm making. And I'm looking to buy, just like Josh with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. You want the targets. You want the boom week. He still led the team in targets this week. And I think defenses are going to quickly realize they cannot ignore Rashid Shaheed anymore. This kid looks great. He looks fast. He is a downfield threat. And as they need to start focusing their defense on Rashid Shaheed, we're going to start seeing Chris Olave catching some of those deep balls. Derek Carr is willing to throw the deep balls. It's just not happening to Olave right now because of the blanket coverage he's seeing. So I think we're going to see a much better second half of the season out of Chris Olave. And look at him right now. He is the disappointment of the year. He's the wide receiver 26. So again, and I told you, wide receivers are scoring a ton of points right now. So buy Garrett Wilson, buy Chris Olave, and move any wide receiver that you possibly can because they're a dime a dozen, putting it bluntly. And maybe I'm jaded, but they just really, really are. Josh, segment of the show, chill the fuck out. It is the dud that is merely a blip on the schedule, though actually you have a couple of, well, not really a boom game, but a high volume game that you think might just be a blip on the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, if you have Saquon Barkley,
Don't get
you gotta
too
be
excited.
happy, right? 39 touches this past week? Like, what? Of course, that landed 126 rushing yards, which isn't great. But, the fluctuation at quarterback going from Tyrod Taylor to a third-string backup who's never, I think he only threw 4 passes all game long.
It was all in overtime. Keep that in mind. They did not throw a pass in the second half of the game. I think it was all
they
overtime.
needed to run the football as a result of the way that this game script went. So if you have Saquon or maybe don't have Saquon or hey, I'm going to use this as shit, the tides are changing. I got to see if I can go buy him. Don't. This is still a bad offense without a wide receiver one. And it's just not great because the offensive line sucks and Daniel Jones sucks too. And even if he might be cleared, but hey, if you can find somebody to trade him, go for it. I think I would at this point, just because I know running back help is a dime a dozen at this point, but you're not getting the return on investment of Saquon being a wide receiver one.
I was going to say,
he's an RB2 at this point.
Know what you're getting. It's the same thing we talked about with Jalen Waddle, and I've said it a lot on this show. Buy with your eyes wide open, and so you don't overpay. Don't go pay for 39 carries. It'll never happen again. And if it does, he'll be dead the next week. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm genuinely worried about what Saquon Barkley might look like next week.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few running backs that can handle that amount of touches in a game. I know Derrick Henry is one of them. I'm not 1,000% convinced that Saquon Barkley doesn't come out of this scathed.
Joe, I just want to quickly throw out, sorry, buddy, I was saving your last question for the Monday Miracle for our Monday football segment. So tune into the end of the show. Last 5 minutes, we'll get you. We'll talk about your team a little bit. So.
But the other guy I want to mention is Christian Kirk, because heading into yesterday's game, the Pittsburgh Steelers allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers out of the slot. 31.1 fantasy points per game out of the slot. Christian Kirk runs predominantly out of the slot. This should have been Christian Kirk weeks to feast. 5 targets, 4 catches, 46 yards. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? What? I'm pretty sure we told somebody to bench Jalen Waddle for Christian Kirk.
Yeah, that was that kid. Well, I said go. We told him to bench Terry McLaurin as well. We said we both picked Ekeler and Kirk, and Jalen Waddle. Fine. Yeah, but Jalen Waddle and Terry McLaurin were both a part of that question. So sorry about that. Trust the process, right, Josh?
Yeah, exactly. Process never lies, damn it.
I'm going to tell people chill out on the Rams wide receivers. I don't think there's an immense amount of panic. There may be now with a Matt Stafford injury, and it's been 2 bad weeks for Cooper Kupp. Don't panic. They're going to have
been there though.
The targets have been there. They're still going to throw a ton, and even if they have to move to a backup quarterbacks love to throw to their first option. And the way this offense is drawn up, that's going to be Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua on any given play. And then I went in to look at Brett Rippon, because I don't remember a lot about Brett Rippon. I think he fucked around with the Broncos for a little bit there. He is a career 60% passer with 5.8 yards per attempt. That's almost number for number what Baker Mayfield is doing this season. And we're not worried about Mike Evans and Chris Godwin because we know the fantasy points are still there. So don't get freaked out if it's not Matt Stafford. Don't sell these guys. Don't take them out of your lineup. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua still every week starts. My opinion, no matter who the quarterback is there. And maybe they'll go get John Wolford. So.
Good.
Yeah.
I thought the whole idea behind drafting Stetson Bennett was that he would be the guy, but I think he ended up with a PED suspension or something, didn't he? Because I know Jake Kaner did. I wasn't.
No, I want to shout out. He's basically admitted he's an alcoholic, and it has affected a big part of his life. And so they took him on, put him on the NFI list. So
fair enough.
No, he has some demons to work out, and hopefully he does. But no, it will not be Stetson Bennett. So deep waivers, no longer from our buddy MF Dice Dealer, Drunken Dynasty. He has decided to hang up the fantasy gloves. And buddy, if you're still watching, we love you. We'll still have you on the show sometime. So I will be covering deep waivers. And guess what? My very first week, I forgot to put notes for any of my deep waivers. So this is all off the cuff.
These are right.
I do terribly. So these are all players that are available in more than 90% of leagues on ESPN. We are looking for, I don't want to call them bottom of the barrel, but it's essentially what they are. And this is still a redraft focus, except I kind of made segments in here. So at wide receiver, Michael Wilson, Khalil Shakir. I've already talked a little bit about Shakir, but Michael Wilson, another 6 targets this week. And as I mentioned earlier, I think this Cardinals offense can improve with Kyler Murray, and Michael Wilson has made himself a viable wide receiver too. And I think that's going to matter once we get Kyler Murray back into the game. Old man corner, it was a joke last week. I'm going to say, give me Julio Jones. He's shown a propensity that he can still mildly play football. He scored a touchdown this week in a high scoring game. You never know what's going to happen with injury, and you want a part of good offenses. So if I'm looking at old men who are going to be out there on waivers, give me Julio Jones. the exact opposite of Julio Jones. In Dynasty, give me Jake Bobo. And I'm going to throw another name out there that I didn't put into my list, mainly because I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Andre Iasavis out of Cincinnati. 4 targets this year, 4 targets, and has already scored 2 touchdowns. And if you're looking in Dynasty, you're looking for players who might have an opportunity down the road. And this is a guy where you don't know how long Tyler Boyd's going to stick around. You don't know if T. Higgins is going to be on the team next year. So there could be some changes in Cincinnati where we see these young wide receivers get on the field. Same thing with Jake Bobo. Tyler Lockett is 30, maybe 31 years old. If this is a guy who's going to put himself in Pete Carroll's good graces, this is a guy who could have some availability or some productivity next season. And for Superflex, go look for Jaren Hall. I agree with Josh. I don't think that the Vikings are going to be buyers. I think they're going to be sellers, and I think they're going to see what they have out of this kid. He's out there on waivers in a ton of leagues, and it's super flex. Why not give it a gamble? It worked out pretty well with Tyson Bagent, at least for 1 week. Maybe we see the same thing out of Jaren Hall. Josh, let's talk about Monday night. Detroit Lions at home after a rough week against Baltimore, taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. They are 8-point favorites. The over-under on this game is 46. And as I mentioned, Joe, hours ago, brought up, he needs a Monday miracle. He is down 20. He has the Detroit defense going, but he also is playing against Jahmyr Gibbs. He's a Raiders fan, but he really needs that Lions D to go off. Well, guess what, Joe? I'm going to be rooting for you because I also am down 14 points with the Detroit D to go. So I am also rooting for a big Detroit defense. Josh, are we going to be happy or are we going to be sad?
I hope so. I thought San Francisco would wax Minnesota last week, and that didn't exactly happen. So, yeah. I will say the saving grace for the Raiders, and I didn't think I would ever say this, Jimmy G comes back.
Yeah.
I think the one thing you can bank on, Jacoby Myers anytime touchdown.
Ooh, I love that. Yes.
Because that Detroit secondary has had some ups and downs this year. That's for sure. I think the Lions win. What's the spread on this? 8?
-8.
Yeah, that's a little high for my taste. And of course, now that means they'll probably win by 2 touchdowns. So,
yep.
Yeah, I'll take the Raiders against the spread. I'll probably go under 46, but I do think the Lions win outright.
Yeah, I'll go Lions money line. I'll go over, and then I'll take that Jacoby Myers anytime if I'm putting a little 3-legger together for tonight. Joe, I got to be blunt with you. I don't think you stand a chance because I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a monster night tonight. That's a big part of me picking the over there. So I'll be rooting for the Detroit D, but I just don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be held to few enough points to be able to get you that win there. Josh, we made it through the show. You have a good day, buddy.
I get to finish things up and then go to work. So that's
there you go. I was going to say, yeah, when the show runs long, Josh has no free time whatsoever. Folks, we thank you for tuning in. We thank you for the questions. We thank you for the response. We hope we gave you an opportunity to vent. That's what this show is all about. When to panic, when to chill the fuck out. Please make sure you're following Club Fantasy on all the socials at Club Fantasy FFL. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram, or we're on X, I guess. We're on Instagram. We're on everything. You can find us. We're more than happy to answer questions. We answer all the questions on Facebook Messenger, Twitter, Instagram. We're there for you guys to help you guys get some wins and hopefully give you guys some great advice. We drop articles every single day of the week, DFS focused, offense versus defense when it comes to the wide receiver matchups. If you're looking for it, we probably have it, but way more importantly, we go live so damn much. I think Tuesday is our only day off. I don't even know if it is still a day off. But otherwise, you're going to find a show on Club Fantasy helping you win for the week. So if you're watching us on YouTube, it costs you absolutely nothing to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It definitely helps us out. Thank you guys. I hope your Monday miracles come true. For Josh, I'm Ryan. Follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL.